is on. Recording started.
That's how you can think of the Justice Department in here. Everything it does is right. Oh, and you could think of the humility department as like professional standards department, internal affairs department, you know? Anyway, does that answer your question about why humility is fundamental
Yes.
to good thinking?
Yeah. I was trying to think, what other term will replace humility?
Well, I typically use skepticism, and it's just directed at the self. So skepticism from the Greek skeptikos, saying I don't know. So it's not necessarily skepticism in the common sense of rejecting something, except for rejecting confidence and certainty. So my name Eris, right? The S is skepticism, but when I named my dog Eris, I changed the S to H for humility, but it's the same thing.
I don't know. Skepticism stands out more to me than humility.
Skepticism is something that a lot of people are against. They hear that word and it's ugly. Like when I tell people what my name stands for, they go, "Oh, imagination, love that. Empiricism, don't know what that is. Reason, don't really like that. Skepticism, hate it." Everybody loves humility. Our culture is against skepticism in a lot of ways. That's just sort of being annoying by being skeptical. But we also hate arrogance. And what's the opposite of arrogance? Humility. So even though humility and skepticism of the self are the same thing, skepticism is more biting, whereas humility is softer and gentler, and it's just fucking one of the, commandments of our cultures and religions to be humble. So I think it's useful to tap into that. Also, it works in conversation. Like,
true.
Let me tell you about this. Can I tell you about this?
No, I'm listening.
When I'm talking about the mind to someone, they'll be like, "Oh, that's just one way of seeing it, But hey, what about quantum mechanics? And we're also hearts and guts, and it's the whole body, and you have to be really holistic, and oh my gosh, you're being so scientific and closed-minded, talking about we are brains. What about the magic of experience? Blah blah blah." Okay. Then the moment I drop humility, I say, "Gosh, it's so unfortunate because there are all these scientists working really hard they've studied this matter. And it's amazing because I'll go talk to brains and they believe in everything they produce. They consider their own personal opinion more valuable and more important than anything the research could have yielded." And I just think that if we were a little bit more humble, if we realized that our mechanisms aren't as reliable as we think we are, and we don't actually have truth in here, and that if we were more open-minded and learned from the research and blah blah blah, and if we weren't all, "Oh, I have truth, I am right," and now all of a sudden they shut the fuck up about their quantum consciousness and their knees. They're like, "Oh yeah, self-awareness is important, humility is important, hell yeah." So what were you saying?
See, that's the problem I have right there. In your situation, you use it to only comfort the idiot. I'm not getting the real definition using humility. And when you tell me, you say you use it as a word because spontaneous sounds negative. But as far as two people who know what we're talking about, when you say spontaneous, that appears more to my intellectual.
Spontaneous? You mean skepticism?
Skepticism. I'm sorry. Now I'm sounding stupid. skepticism appeals to me more as a better definition, and I can see you
But
kind of agree. And your argument for using humility, which really doesn't peak out a match to me, is because it sounds more positive when I'm giving an explanation. I only think that applies to people who are kind of slow on the subject, because then you're just like, oh, then they shut up. Well, if you weren't talking to that person, talking to me, humility doesn't. No, I think you can do. I think you can find a better word without trying to worry about offending people, because humility.
Hold on. There's something else I gotta tell you. Hold on. I hear your point. No, I came up with humility well before I saw the effect that it has on hippies. Humility. I went to a critical thinking conference in about 10 years ago, and I think I got it from them. That's where I got the term intellectual humility, knowing that my thoughts are not necessarily correct. Knowing that, I mean, it's about humility. It's about, because I think the biggest problem in the world right now is intellectual arrogance, thinking that because you thought it, it's right. I think there are a lot of people who have skepticism, who exercise skepticism, who call things into question. In fact, quite unreasonable skepticism sometimes, right? Like flat earthers, they pride themselves on being skeptical. But humility, yes, it's more inward, but that's why, because everybody can doubt other people. There are very few people who are truly able to doubt themselves. And it's a value that needs to be encouraged. If you tell people we got to be skeptical, that's outward. That's all that means to anybody, right? You have to reprogram all of the world, redefine it, for all of the world. For the Greeks, it didn't maybe mean that, but it was more inward. But now that's what it means. So it's burned.
True. Okay. Now I get what you're saying, but would that really be an it itself, or would skepticism be more of an it? Because humility to me sounds more of a trait you would learn, and the actual brain wouldn't notice the difference between it. So
no.
I get what you.
We are our brains, remember. So anything that you're doing is a brain thing. Anything that's happening is a brain thing. Now, some its, you wouldn't describe them as actual, you wouldn't say that they correlate to some physical entity so much as they correlate, it's a trait of the system. And so anyway, it's a thing that still will have conditions and have an effect. Well, I guess not necessarily.
Say it from this perspective for me. If I was thinking in terms of totally brain and chemicals and your its, I would say the brain would have to produce something physical when it came to skepticism, because it would be an evolutionary mark. But when it came to humanity, when it came to
humility,
humility, it's more of a learn, because humility would actually.
You're confused. Did you hear what I said? You are your brain. It's not like evolution provides a brain and there's this soul that exists with the brain that changes over time. So you distinguish between a brain thing and a learned thing. No. There's nature is genes, nurture is the arrangement after the fact. Either way, it's the brain.
I'm not getting that point.
Did you say that you were attributing the architecture and chemistry of the brain to evolution, right?
In a way. Well, comparing just two terms, I'm trying to see, because you say you use humility in a big way in this, but humility to me would not present itself as an it. Why are you using humility when humility comes off as a learned trait? Because we were going off, you say something like skepticism, some things are required. Skepticism, I think, would be more required than humility, Because skepticism makes you question, should I eat this berry? Humility doesn't have anything to, humility is more of, should I feel bad because I think I know everything? That's a learned trait. If I was in a jungle, I could care less.
What do you think humility means? Look up humility.
I'm looking at a modest to low view of one's own importance, humbleness, the actual technical Oxford Dictionary definition.
Okay, look up intellectual humility. Or epistemic humility.
Intellectual first is a mindset. It involves recognizing and acknowledging one's limitation and fallibility in order to pursue knowledge. Fallibility, yep. Sorry.
No.
To pursue knowledge, truth, and understanding. It can also be described as a character trait of virtue that allows people to think and reason well.
Right.
Man, where did they get that definition from? It's a mindset that got, okay, it is more simple. A mindset that guides out intellectual conduct. That's very defining a definition with itself.
Yeah, that doesn't say much.
That doesn't help.
Okay, the other thing is, as far as a learned trait, your its, some of them are encoded by genes, and then the rest of them are learned. So whether it's learned or not doesn't have any bearing on whether it's in it or not.
So you're not saying you're not saying humility will be considered one of your its?
It could be. Well, see, I have so most its are interpretive its, but I also have things called gits and yits. So G and Y, and gits are values. But I haven't really visualized how those work exactly. And then yits are knowledge. But so yes, so humility could exist as a git, or as a yit, the knowledge that I am a brain. As a git, I don't want to overestimate my ability. And then it can also exist as an it. If I have an idea, check it. If I have an idea and it conflicts with someone else's, if I have an idea and if it conflicts with someone else's, then listen to the other person. That's a humility it.
I get it. I can see how that one goes both ways. Okay, moving on. So my whole point of asking that was to get a better understanding of how you're using humility in this. And if we're really getting down to it, then you just brought your second and third options up, gits and yits. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Which makes more sense now. It's broader. Because I can't just see it under the one category you have. Like, it would have to fall into something else. I don't know. To me, humility doesn't come off. Either it's completely part of the basis where you wouldn't even identify it, I mean, the core itself, or it's that and part of something else that can be learned. And I say that because not everybody has humility.
You can't know that. Not everybody ex-livers humility, but I would assume that everybody does have humility mechanisms in here, but they just typically get beat out, so they don't. They're not the ones ending up producing the behavior.
And that is such a big question, because what would be considered, I mean, I might be getting off the subject and I'll get right back on. But I'm saying, will we really be considered the only species that even identifies humility? No other species.
Of course they do. They have hierarchies. You have to, a sign of humility, for instance, is exposing your neck, saying, hey, I know, big boss, that you can destroy me. I know that you have much higher status than me. And look, I'm going to show my neck. You can rip my neck if you want. I am less than you.
What animal does that in nature, though?
Primates? I
None
mean,
that I
other
can think of.
primates?
Huh?
Other primates?
To the same primate or a
Oh,
different
dogs. I have a
species?
dog. He shows me humility all the time.
No, that's our human interpretation of humility placed on the dog. We have no idea unless you were born a dog and then had something like AI interpret what that dog is saying. Every time somebody tells me to understand the mindset of another animal, I don't think that's humanly possible. Only AI
I
could come and
trust me.
interpret.
I hear that. I hear that. But no. You can I'm not talking about his internal experience. He doesn't have language to assign to it and all of that. So there's not much of an internal experience. But what there is, in for instance, a lessening of energy, for instance, a smaller posture, things like that, to show me that I'm the boss. Blah blah blah.
True, but that could be an evolutionary response
It
to
is.
know to knowing he, but we call it humility when it's something deeper to show he only does that because he knows you're going to provide food for him
Yeah, and
under.
we only do it because it helps us stay in our tribe and not get kicked out because nobody likes us because we're overestimating our abilities or whatever, and so they can't count on us. We're always going, "Oh, hey, I'm gonna go out for a hunt today. I'm gonna bring you all back 3 bears."
Hey,
And
but we're comparing two similar species. Humans and humans will do that because we're wired. When you go to any other animal species, you're only assuming because your brain is putting what you want onto that other external animal. Because I have a theory about animals, like we feel we have control. They know when it's time to eat. No, actually, when dogs bark, you obey them and you feed them. So are they you training them or are they training you? And we get this arrogance. You're right, humility, but it's arrogance that comes down to thinking we know better only because our brains wants to convince us of that. But most animals have established equilibriums without having to even know consciously of humility, but we use it as a common human construct just to make us convince ourselves that we know what we're talking about when we honestly don't know anything, even when it comes to animals. Oh, really? We think we're the smartest, but it turns out ants, even in their hierarchy we can't identify any humility, have a better evolutionary structure than us. Please, they'll laugh at us. But we look at them as being stupid. Our constructs of brains think what we think is smart is smart only to humans. So interaction between humans, yes, humility means everything. But what does it mean to another animal like a primate? Yes, another primate show humility to another primate. But what would a primate do to a human? What is humility but another human construct? So no, I don't think it is required or we even comprehend it enough. It's just another word like love. We keep putting these BS definitions to make sense of what we think makes sense. But you're saying we are the brain. We only assume that, but the brain could be making us think we are the brain. We'll never figure out until we get that total intermediate AI in my mind. It could be something different, but right now I think like because we went just from humility and you maybe Google it and there's something called intellectual humility. And then it goes into social structures. Why? Why can't it just be humility? Why do you have to be intellectual to even understand? So it shows me that this is another one of those words that just they throw out and use.
are you high right now?
I am, but it goes into my understanding of humility and the Webster dictionary they give. Like I'm not making any of this up. I'm on Google actually sobering up because I'm looking at the definition of humility, and that's a human construct. So are we fooling ourselves? Just another word for humility to make us do what the body does, what it does, because we are. That's what I'm saying. Like humility to me is just another word they made up in a dictionary, and a dictionary definition they give doesn't really apply to how you're using. And then when we try to justify, we put the word intellectual in front of it, which defines itself using itself. So it kind of confuses me on how humility keeps coming back up as one of your
You know, words
kids.
aren't real, right?
That's my point. How do we establish something if we have both come to the conclusion that I'm Googling what most people Google and it's still a little bullshit to me? It's making me skeptical and question it. I'm skeptical
so
about the
lost.
definition of humility. That's what's blowing my mind, which is why I keep going to, I don't think humility is a really good word to really get down to the core of maybe what you're trying to explain. And ironically, this is sobering me up to not be high. Because if I was, I'd be rambling. Usually when I'm high, I said the word a lot and ramble, but I hadn't lost my train of thought at all. Maybe it might be a rant to you, but the way I'm looking at it is, yes, words are fake, but we have to have a standard. And the standard for this humility is not correlating to your document. And it keeps coming down to this. I was trying to get where you get your core reasoning for critical thinking. It all comes back to the critical thinking, because if we're going off of it, your 4 things for critical thinking were recognition, which we established is a good one, but we have to go back down to like critical research, which is a combination of scientific method and critical recognition. That won't be one. Next one, I would ask where you get that from. Then we will move on to reflection and resolution. And I'm only asking that, trying to get an understanding for, if I was to read your paper, I would have to go off of your definition of critical thinking, which we both agreed is kind of guessing, even if you go through Google. So it comes back to, I have to understand your basis if I want to go off of your paper. Because you're not redefining critical thinking, but you kind of are pointing out points of critical thinking that don't come up.
Defining critical thinking.
Not defining, not finding.
I'm defining it.
Yes.
I'm giving a useful definition to a term that has had lots of definitions.
Exactly. And if I'm reading your paper, I would totally trust your definition. And I'm trying to get into, how did you come to that conclusion when even Google, I'm not trying to be funny when I say that, because the collaboration of all the information can't really give me a good definition. It just
because
brings
of
me
a
down
lack
a
of
rabbit.
critical recognition.
I wouldn't even say
most people that, no, I'll tell you, most people that talk about reasoning, talk about biases, say stupid kind of empty shit about it, because they haven't figured out that it's the mind that is sort of doing this, and that you can't define thinking without the mind. It's fucking stupid. So anybody who doesn't include psychology in a definition of thinking is obviously not contributing.
I agree. So yeah, so we got recognition, and like I said, I would just come back. So you were wondering why I just kept questioning like the humility. It's only because it was a little conflict of interest when I do my research, comparing it to you defining it, and you have it down to 4 categories. We got like I said, we got recognition out of the way. Now we're down to research, critical research.
Yeah.
Let me go back to that initial list they gave me on critical thinking. And research is not necessarily mentioned anywhere when I'm looking up information for critical thinking skills.
Right. I don't want us to judge my definition of critical thinking according to someone else's definition of critical thinking. I would rather judge it according to whether it achieves a goal, whether it's complete.
Like, that's my point. Like, I wasn't knocking you. I was saying my point is,
oh yeah,
nobody really has a definition of critical thinking skills. So
yeah.
I'm really getting on your ass because I want to go with yours, and you're making good points, because that whole recognition came back.
I love you on my ass.
Huh?
I love you on my ass.
Recognition came back in such a beautiful full circle that.
Yeah.
Like,
sweet.
wow, that's exactly. Now,
so critical research.
Okay. No, that was just the next one I was going. So okay. So the humility, just that was a whole going down that. But you see why I was like humility and trying to understand your mindset for it, because it is just a word, but you have your, I want to get what you're thinking. And we got there with
when you, that first definition you found for intellectual humility, I was almost embarrassed at how perfect that was, that someone else had already said that. So that it was a very good definition. It didn't mention how you can achieve humility. It's critical recognition, having an understanding of how fallible the mind is. Yeah. Okay.
which
Then
put me on my which kind of put me on my high horse, going back to skepticism, because my skepticism jumped in first before my humility did. Why is that?
which is why I promote humility over skepticism.
Well, which is, I totally get it, like you said, but I don't want you to do it for the sake of making some people feel nice about it.
No. I was just saying that although skepticism, because in my name it's skepticism, and then after that it's in French, two words in French that start with S to keep it so it's like eris. It's skepticism, especially of self. Oh, I didn't count of, but anyway, skepticism, especially of self. But the of self part is so important that okay. Oh, hold on a second. Okay, hold on a second. Don't try. I'm not going to finish that last sentence. Okay. I've broken critical thinking into 4 things. And it starts here. Okay. Skepticism of the other, doubt, that comes later. That comes in critical reflection. That comes in critical research. Critical recognition is, hold on. First of all, when I come to the party, I'm dressed appropriately. Then I'll talk to other people as well about how they're dressed, and they can point out how I'm dressed, and so on. But I'm coming in there ready to learn, ready or not. I'm dressed appropriately. I've got my whole sewing kit. I'm ready to make changes. I know that my birthday suit is not a perfect tuxedo. So that knowledge, that's what you're coming in with, saying, hey, I'm coming in my birthday suit, and when you ask me, when you look at me, the answers you're going to be getting, that's just my pre-programming. But I know that that's how it works, and I know that some things will be really attractive for the wrong reasons, some things will be unattractive for the wrong reasons. I learned all of that. I recognize all of that. I recognize the influence of everything and what it's all based on, blah, 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 blah. Now I'm ready to be in the party.
I get it. Once again, I'm just going through other words. Research.
I want to hear your other words. And so let your its work on that. And you'll the more familiar you are with the words that I've put, the more material your its will have to come up with something better. Okay, so what about critical research? Can we move on to that one?
Oh, I thought we were already on that one.
Oh, yeah.
I thought we got recognition out the way. That was, and I get it. First step is to recognize your, everything, even self and environment. And the next one was you gave a good example, like you walk into the party. Maybe you came there with your sewing kit and your birthday suit. Maybe you came there under an impression that you knew what to do first. I get it. Next, I get what you're saying. Would you essentially be researching, or would you be questioning yourself because you say I came with the sewing kit? So would you be questioning yourself?
Sorry, but all of that was for critical recognition. There was no metaphor for research in that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So we down to research, and you have scientific method plus recognition.
Out of the 4, critical research is the most that humans have developed.
The second, exactly. So
out of the 4,
is it research or question?
But is what research or questioning? Because
I'm
saying talking about research, so it's research.
That's what I'm saying. So why after you recognize, why would you go to critically researching your environment?
Oh,
An
hold on.
example.
I don't know that we can necessarily put these as steps. That's point one.
Oh,
I mean,
I
these
have
are the
step.
4 components. Well, really, it's the 3 components of critical thinking: recognition, research, and reflection. And then the 4th thing, resolution, is sort of, it's not really critical
And
thinking, more critical communication.
well, okay. So the way I'm looking at it, for examples, they would only make sense if they did come in. So which is what I took from it. Because if you have recognition, it has to be the first one because you can't come up with
Yeah,
a
that's true.
resolution.
But then research and reflection can, well, all right, here. So research is empiricism. It's going out into the world and it's getting information while knowing, having critical recognition. So you know things about the samplers, things like the sampler bias, the observer effect, the sample bias, the observer effect, selection bias, all that stuff. Okay. Data snooping, all that stuff. Okay. You observe the world and knowing how the observation process is happening and trying to reduce, trying to keep as much observation on paper. That's research. You do science. Now you've acquired some information. Now, what do I do with this information? What if I know X and I know Y, what can I conclude? Do they indicate Z? That's critical reflection. Okay, they do indicate Z. I've used principles of logic. I know what the valid inferences are. Of course, I have critical recognition, so I've learned the common invalid inferences that the human mind does, and I tried to notice those when they happen and correct for those. Great. So now I've got this thing that I believe to be true. Then I'm going to go share it with somebody else. Oh shit, he came to a different answer. Well, hey, we both have critical recognition, so we both know that maybe both of us are wrong. So now we're going to talk about it. We're going to try to resolve this discrepancy between our answers. So that's critical thinking plus critical communication. Now, even if you didn't do research, you read something. So that's why maybe you don't do all 4 of.
Can you hear me? My
Yeah.
bad. Hit the wrong button instead of denying. I hate Apple.
So, but anyway, but you don't need to critical recognition in order to have achieved any kind of critical thinking, there needs to be critical recognition. But you don't necessarily have to be a scientist. You don't have to be engaged in critical research. You could be engaged in critical reflection based on the research of other people or the reflection of other people's, right? So you're on Instagram, you see a video. Now, how are you going to critically process that video? How are you going to determine whether or not you should be influenced by it and how much to be influenced by it? That's part of critical reflection. So everybody needs critical recognition. Everybody can do critical reflection, and everybody can do critical resolution. But with the tools we have today, no sense in doing a whole lot of critical research in your backyard unless you're a kid learning. Or the scientific community has fallen to the government.
Okay.
So my mission was to just figure out a way to teach critical recognition, really. But I think that one way to do that is through it theory, showing that there are all these mechanisms interacting, and that there are certain ones that I can guarantee are in there, even if you don't see them, even if they don't often ex-liver, they are happening in there because our brains are all we all have basically the same its. They just have different weights and powers. But we can do better than that. We can do better than just helping the species achieve critical recognition. We'll be the first species that we know of to ever achieve self-awareness / critical recognition. So that's pretty cool. ChatGPT already has critical recognition, but so we've already created something with critical recognition, but that's okay. And that's just a testament to how close we are. Then the other thing that we can, then the next step is critical reflection. Oh yeah, a technique for how to evaluate something, how to understand something, or how to, minimize failing to understand something or whatever. Then critical resolution. Two people have different ideas. What do we do now? How do we find some truth together? Yeah. So on my channel, all right, I'm just gonna say this and then stop. On my channel, I have some videos that I do to try to teach critical recognition. I act out chapters of a book called The Art of Thinking Clearly, which has a whole bunch of biases that we have. And also, I don't remember what other project I was going to mention. No, maybe I was just thinking because that's based on actually two books. The Art of Thinking Clearly and You Are Not So Smart. Yeah. So, all right. Because there's a pause, I'm going to say one more thing. If I can give you full critical recognition, that would be a major achievement for me. You have all of the natural critical recognition of like a smart person, an ability to change one's mind, an ability to see new truths, etc. Okay. Well, I guess those two things mean the same thing, but whatever. An ability to conceive new truths and better interpretations. So most of the intellectual humility you already have. Critical recognition is intellectual humility plus psychological understanding to really bring the humility home and to make the humility informed. Because we don't want to be just like, oh, I can't trust anything I think ever, right? So if we have an actual understanding of the psychological system and what kind of errors are likely to happen and what kind of corrections are possible and what things can maybe be trusted a little bit, then that humility is actually, usable. So productive, anyway, and then you have critical recognition. I want to create a test. I want you to help me to make a test. And also a little pamphlet. Hey, you just woken up. You just realized you're a brain. You're not some energy in a fifth dimension. You're not a heart. You're not a soul put in by God. You're a human brain, and we know a lot about the human brain. And blah, blah, blah. I want to create a little explanatory thing. I want to create a little pretest, a little critical recognition pretest, a little critical recognition post-test. I made one, a pretest. I haven't looked at the girls' answers yet. I'm too scared to. But that's a whole other story. But anyway, but on that pretest would be things like if you make a mistake, how do you know? Someone without critical recognition says, oh, because I noticed the error. Someone with critical recognition will say, well, what do you mean? It's possible I won't know. Because it's not like there's a reasonable dude in here checking everything.
That would be a crazy test to come up with because that'd be a good test. I'd like to see your test.
Let me pull up what I've got so far of it.
That'd be a crazy mind test. I couldn't even begin to sit here and think of right offhand how, get someone that aha moment.
Hey, hold on. There's already a definition of critical recognition. What does this say? Oh no, it's just a definition of critical and definition of recognition. All right, good. I want to go to Drive. So for instance, one way that I'll know that you're closer, or that you have a deeper critical recognition, is when you stop talking crazy about brains talking to us. Oh yeah, I want to respond to that because, sorry, I'm pointing. Hope that hasn't been triggering. Because logic, with Occam's razor, critical reflection tells us that we are brains. There has never been any evidence for anything else. There's never been a thing that we have seen damaged and then seen changes to cognitive function, personality, emotion, etc. Except every time there is a change to the brain, we have seen those things. And that's as you know, that's as sure as it gets. Is it possible that we completely misunderstood that, or that there's, you know, and this is also with a no conspiracy assumption, right? Now, is it possible that we are actually sort of AI ourselves, and we programmed ourselves to not be able to realize that and to think that we're brains? Sure. But if that's the case, we're not able to figure that out. So that's a waste of time. There, the in fact, the fact that it's so hard for us to realize that we're brains supports that, because brains didn't see brains for 99.9% of their evolution. No, 100%. 100%, 100.0%, 100% of the evolution of our species. The species has not been exposed to brains. Saying, oh shit, look, when you do this, the person can't talk anymore. Oh shit, when you do this, the person gets angry for no reason. Well, no, it's not because I hit him. All right, you're okay. But when you do this, the person laughs for no reason. How about that? Okay. Never. So the brain hasn't evolved with that understanding. And it's very hard to, even once you're told it, to have understanding, because we didn't even evolve to be able to understand really that kind of thing. How these things that we can't even perceive, I mean, we can if we open up somebody else, but that we usually don't perceive, are producing all this shit that what? It doesn't make sense. It's like physical activity. I can see how a rock can hit another rock. But how can a rock hitting another rock, one atom affecting another, one neuron affecting another, be color? That doesn't make any sense. So we reject it. But of course, we are that brain. So anyway, no, I'm rambling. But the point is that you are a brain. Do you know what split brain patients are?
I've heard maybe, but I don't want to speak on something I'm not sure about.
They're epileptics who, in order to reduce the spreading of the hyperelectrical activity in the brain, which is a seizure, in order to avoid that spreading across the whole brain, they cut the brain in half. Okay. And, you know, you've got these two chunks and there's this bridge between the two. Okay. And there's no real sort of processing happening in the bridge. It's just taking information from one side and giving it to the other. So they didn't want this electrical activity to this out of control electrical activity to spread. They cut it, and it was a great it's a great treatment, and they still use it for worst case scenario. Okay, but they found something really interesting, and this is how we know that we're brains, that information could no longer pass between these two hemispheres, of course, because they severed the fucking link. And so they have really interesting stuff, like for instance, all right, here's one. All right. So the right eye, right visual spectrum, this is my right, is processed by the left visual cortex, and the opposite. Okay. So, they didn't, by the way, they didn't sever this connection from the eye to the thing. Okay. Anyway, so something is presented to the right visual field, and it's processed by the left hemisphere. Okay. That's the language hemisphere, the interpreter. Let's say that you put the word laugh on the screen. You make it impossible for the left eye to view it, only the right eye. So you're guaranteeing that only the left brain is interpreting it. Okay, you ask them, hey, what did you see on the screen? They say, oh, it's the word laugh. Well, that's because that's where speech production is, on the same side that the word was received on. Okay. Now, show them the word laugh in their left visual field so that it's processed by their right hemisphere. And their right hemisphere, although it sees the word laugh, isn't able to tell the left hemisphere because the connection's been severed. But remember, I said the speech production is on the left hemisphere, as well as most language things. Okay. So the person, the right hemisphere, which doesn't have much language ability but can read the word, gets or maybe they did it with sound. I think it can still read though. All right. Well, either way, the right hemisphere has received the instruction of laugh. So the person laughs. The researcher, the doctor says, "Hey, why did you just laugh?" That's a job for the left brain interpreter, who's going to produce a verbal explanation. Left brain interpreter is going to say, I was just thinking of a joke. The doctor's going to say, no, you fucking weren't. I showed you the word laugh to your right hemisphere. That's why you laughed. Left brain will say, no. The patient will say, no, that's not true. So they did a whole bunch of experiments like this, where they would feed information in one part of the brain. The person would produce behavior, and then the person wouldn't be able to explain that behavior because the explainer had not received that initial information. Does that make sense?
Yes, very interesting story. So, at what point during our period here did we split from the Neanderthals and I would say became conscious of ourselves?
We didn't. We didn't. We haven't. Consciousness is a myth. Now, depending on what aspect of consciousness you're talking about, either that's not really happening, or that's an unsurprising feature of the brain, but it shouldn't be unified with the other things you're attributing to consciousness. Neo is conscious. Any complex processing system is conscious because that's what processing is. It's encountering information and doing something with it. So, of course, the brain is processing information. It's because you are a brain, you are experiencing that processing.
Conscious of, no, you're explaining conscious in the basic form. Conscious of itself.
Yeah, we're not conscious of ourselves. We haven't achieved self-awareness.
That's my point. So, you say we haven't?
We have not. Most people think that heaven is possible even without their brain existing.
Wait, say it again.
Most people think that that an afterlife is possible, which is it's an absurd question. If you're a brain, your brain, if it's rotting in the ground or burning in the furnace, is not up in the clouds. So we haven't achieved basic self. Oh, you mean like a sense of self, like an identity?
Yeah, I'm not talking about. I hate the misconception because when you say self-awareness, most people think spirit. No, I'm not talking about spirit.
Okay.
We all, yes, of course, naturally we're all conscious because the brain is processing. But when do we become aware of us knowing that the brain itself is processing information on a separate level?
On a separate level.
Yes, because I know as a Neanderthal, I'm still a human and I'm just doing things. I'm eating because something is telling me eat.
No.
Otherwise, you're going to die.
No. You are eating because you are experiencing desire. And the reason you're experiencing desire is because you evolved to be motivated to eat, because otherwise you won't eat. Especially when it involves as much work as it does.
And that's it. That's exactly it. You're motivated to eat. Is that motivation the brain grabbing a conscience to make it more efficient?
Because no, there's no other thing. Consciousness.
No, because think about it. Without that, as a baby, you had a desire to eat because your body physically needs to eat. Think about babies. You're so stuck on we conscious and became adults. When you're born, you're nothing. We are the species that stays with our parents the long for 20 some odd years because our brain doesn't truly develop like we think it does. Every other creature, you're born, get the hell out of here. So as a child, you ain't nothing. Cognitive, smart, but I don't care until you are smart enough to take care of yourself, which is usually at least 6 years old.
No.
Before
I
that
promise you've got this illusion of consciousness because everything you're saying sounds very familiar when there's this illusion of consciousness, a sense of like we wake up. You are conscious as a baby. There's not much memory storage happening, but a baby is processing information. That's why it's with its parents for 20 years, so that it can learn. That's why we're such an amazing species, because we spend 20 years processing information before we go out really fending for ourselves.
But what would be that moment when you realize that you're processing information and you have no control over it? You don't control your heart, your brain is. So
you are your brain. You do control your heart rate. Now, the language part, receiving this, doesn't control it. But you, when I point, you are controlling your heart rate, which is why a monk who has done a whole lot of a whole lot of meditation and stuff, he is able to, like this, slow down his heart rate, like this, speed it up.
But he cannot stop it. He
can.
cannot self-terminate. That is my point.
He can stop his heart. I'm going to look that up. And
please do.
Even if there isn't, I'm going to claim that I'm going to move the goalpost.
But
I'm going to
claim that I hate the fact that it comes down to your only example is some Shaolin monk doing some video game spiritual stuff. No, because no human that doesn't go in the forest doing this spiritual stuff for years and years, which isn't in our society, could self-terminate like that. You can't stop your heart. You can't stop your lungs from breathing. Hold your breath right now and your body will either make you die or you will have a reaction to breathe. The only thing that will stop that is your consciousness to fight your physical body.
Okay.
I think it's two different
things. So you're making my point then, because you're saying that only a fictional consciousness could interrupt physical processes and actually make it possible for a biological system to terminate itself. So if you're saying that it's not possible for a biological system to terminate itself, because of course it would never evolve that way, then right, that's because there is no consciousness. Now, it is possible, though, as a byproduct of just how interconnected the brain is, there are brains that commit suicide. So there are biological organisms that, feel so depressed and not because of a consciousness.
Put a pin in that suicide. There are brains that would commit suicide, but it would need the help of a consciousness to do it if we are our brains, because I really don't think a brain can do that. A brain cannot make it
as a byproduct
stop if it doesn't want to. It will control and keep itself alive. It will shut down the heart only.
Do you hear your supposition that there is a brain and you? You are not understanding that you are the brain. I mean, not the language part specifically, but
I know. But what is the mechanism that makes me realize that I am the brain, unlike any other creature on this planet?
Well,
that's my question.
I can answer that. Bill, yeah, I can answer that sort of vaguely, I guess. So, first of all, you need language. You need easy symbolic representation. Okay. So we're not the only animal where we can associate symbols. Pavlov's dogs, a bell meant eating. So you need to be able to do that so that you can have a word brain. So we're the only species with such advanced verbal language. You need a visual system. You need some dexterity. You cut open a patient. You need some memory. You cut open a patient. You're this biological species that cuts open another member of its species, uses the visual system, it sees the brain. It has memory of the patient's personality, compares that to the state of the brain. It has this word of the brain, and it says, hey, we brain. We brain. Brain? Huh. Brain. Huh. Done. Neanderthals could have done that. Neanderthals probably had enough pattern recognition and basic associations that if they were cutting open skulls, or if they in wars, anytime they had a battle and there was a bash against the head, well, they really have to have an advanced language system, and a written language is easier, so they could keep track of all the different head injuries they saw. But I'm sure but if they had written language, if they had the cognitive capacity for written language, they had the cognitive capacity for I am a brain. There are many species that are like, I am that face, or I am that smell. But usually it's I am that face, not I am that brain, because most species aren't doing surgery.
Which is why I can't believe that they do that if none can come up with a way to prove it to themselves. We're the only species that can make a separate mirror. Most animals look in it. I saw the one where they put the mirror in front of the gorillas and they totally attack it because they don't know. So I would have to get specific examples of animals that actually recognize themselves separately.
Okay, well, you can look up the mirror test, because there are results that show they do what's called the dot test or the smudge test or something, and basically you'll have, I thought gorillas could do it, but pass this mirror dot test, but maybe not. I think there were maybe like dolphins have, but anyway, you walk up to the thing, walks up to the mirror, and then if it sees the smudge and goes like this, it has self-recognition. But look, humans are terrible, so I mean, we did kill off the Neanderthals, or well, interbred with them. So we don't. There's not really any other intelligent brain that we can really compare ourselves to.
So I'm saying, like, why do we kill off? Was the separation of Neanderthal being we're so close genetically, and it was just the way the brain interprets things. Same thing with like.
Sorry, we didn't really kill them off. Most people are. I'm gonna look at the exact percent. I'm gonna look at the average percentage that a Homo sapiens is actually Neanderthal. Neanderthal percentage. Only 1 to 4%. I thought it was gonna be higher.
No, it's very area determined, and I'm pretty sure that it doesn't count. In certain areas was higher. Like, is that even a
Neanderthals are known to contribute up to 1 to 4% of the genomes of non-African modern humans, depending on what region of the world.
Non-African. That was my key term. I'm of African descent. So I really don't know how to go with that Neanderthal of who was their first chicken and egg.
No, we are less Neanderthal than the Europeans. Well, I mean, I'm half, so you are less Neanderthal than the
It was my point. I was gonna be like, I think that mostly applies to Europeans, but that's neither here nor there. I get what you're saying. You're right. So, man, something changed, and we came so much more than, like you said, the basic brain.
Yeah, but I don't want us to oversimplify it and act like there was some binary thing, such as, I mean, I know there isn't a soul, but it's easy, even if there isn't a soul, to imagine some other singular special thing to explain the difference. But we are not, like, we are fucking dumb, bro. We say nonsense, we believe nonsense. We are not by any means conscious, awake, intelligent, where the reality before us is what's represented in here.
That's what I totally agree. I 100%. I'm trying to figure out what tweaked us that little percentage to make us think to even make us go a little above.
Yeah, but when you say what, I'm hearing a singular thing.
Actually, no. I don't. You're hearing, but that's what I'm trying to make it seem like it's not. I know. Okay. I know it's So now
fire. Yeah. Starts with fire. Now we are able to. I think it's that we don't have to use as much energy on digestion, which is what enables the brain to start developing quite a lot. The brain, it's 3 pounds, which is it's 3 kilograms. Anyway, it's 3 or 4% of the mass that uses up 20% of the energy, right? That's not the case for most species. So once we were able to cook our food, kill that bacteria and shit, We had extra energy. Also, we were able to eat more of the food, and so on. So now we got a ton of energy. So then the few humans who happen to have a couple more neural connections, well, they had energy to use those, and then that was favored by the
So,
environment
so
and age hit.
are you inferring that this was an evolutionary? Uh, this was evolutionary.
Yeah. So then the next step is agriculture. Now you don't have to spend your days going out and getting food. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time digesting it. So now you can be sedentary and you can just the brain can just kind of think, can really process its environment. Then you get, a more advanced language. Now it's able to categorize thoughts. It's able to draw associations. That thing and that thing, they're both trees. So anything I know about that thing, I can apply to that thing.
So
Now,
here's my question: was it evolutionary, or was it a byproduct of? I can't think of the word. Adapting to our environment, since it happens over time. Evolution is.
those are literally the same thing.
Say it again.
Those are the same thing. Evolution and adapting to stuff over time. Now, there's a great book by a guy named Bruce Hood that I read this year called No Self. No, that's not true. That's another book called the Self Illusion: How the Social Brain Creates Identity. Because that's the final piece after agriculture and language. While that's happening, there are also group bonds happening, and now we need a sense of identity. And wolves, dogs, they have a sense of identity. I am this, you are.
But why? That's what I'm trying to say. But why? Because it would seem more of a byproduct. Because now, the more we're becoming self-conscious, the more we realize it's not necessarily a good thing. It's causing conflicts between us and wars because we can't establish an equilibrium.
Yeah, this is why we're not. This is how I know we're not conscious, because of how many millions of people die for no reason. We're not conscious of what we're doing. We can give words to it, but it's not. There's not this single observer who's applying all of. All right, if there were a consciousness, it would be able to consult all of the values that exist in this brain, and it would be able to compare those values to our behavior. There are some comparisons that happen, but because there's no consciousness, it is not the case that all of our values get compared to all of our behavior, which is how our behavior can be in stark contrast to our values, because we're distributed across all of these mechanisms. But really, it's about language, having categories and so on. Language is, I think, the key to what you're looking for, to the explanatory gap. And also,
Not
you have
really.
to let go of certain illusions about what this consciousness can do.
Well, I mean, ultimately, I don't think it's language, because language is obsolete if you don't have a translator. We've learned that. If I learn a language,
No. Whoa. Language is everything. Categories are everything. Associations are everything. And that's what language is. It's being able to associate one thing with another thing, maybe a symbol with a representation, or two representations connected by an audible or written or symbol of some kind.
Yeah, that only applies between two people. If not, it's totally irrelevant.
Huh?
Because if I've never taught the language and we don't interact, then the language means absolutely nothing. If I'm looking
at but it means something in here, because the brain is able to work with these associations.
Really. I go back and I'll call you on that one, because I've always been in art major first, one of the things, and human language is nothing but a bunch of symbols that we interpret any way we want to. And the only reason we know language through written is because we interpret it. And that's because somebody told you in language. So no, I refuse to believe that language is anything. Language is nothing between two humans, only if they come together through some separate source, as far as
Helen Keller, deaf and blind. Okay. She learns language. She reports, when asked, I didn't have a self until language. The brain can't.
But that's her interpreting something she doesn't even know exists. Like, I can't take an interpretation of images from a blind person and trust she interpreted it. Helen Keller is a terrible example for me that I would kind of never go towards, because it makes her, no, I've got to do some more research. I think that's a bad example. When it comes to language, when we study language and history and like cave Neanderthals, if you were to see it, whatever they painted is only interpreted by information you received prior to that. If I was to see it, I wouldn't know that was a human hunting a gazelle. I don't know that, but I know that because I've seen it and retain information that that's a picture of a buffalo. But that's still how I'm interpreting. That might not be what they want, because in their mind, that's their language. They share it's only language between two people when two people get involved. So if I never get involved to you knowing free self or whatever language means nothing, because I can talk to myself.
I've created a language.
Hmm.
I can only use it with myself.
Exactly. How would I know your language? How would I know your language unless we come to agreement?
No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't.
You couldn't. You cannot.
No. I see. You're talking about specific word pairings. You're talking about specific sounds to meaning. What I'm talking about is the principle of being able to make associations between a symbol and a meaning. And I'm talking about what that enables the brain to do. Because it streamlines processing.
Specifically association. I refer to that specifically as associations and not language. I get very specific.
Language is associative categories. That's what language is. It's association, it's categories and symbols. Those three words encapsulate language. So in the brain, when you're able to, rather than, all right, what are the wavelengths of violet? From like 400 to like 500, let's say. Okay. Now, a brain that has to deal with, all right, it's no brain would ever categorize it in according to nanometers, but let's just say like there are different shades of violet, and each of those is a different thing. Okay, to the brain, let's say. All of its associations with one violet are not going to be applied to the other violet. Okay. When you have a word that represents all of those things, you have made the system maybe more efficient, unless there's a bad grouping, where now everything that you know about this violet, you can apply to that violet. Now, of course, you don't want to have everything just be one color, so you do need to break it up, but you don't need to break it up blah blah. So it's good to have seven colors in the rainbow and have 7 symbols for those, and be able to associate everything with that rather than with the more specific. Do you understand what I'm saying?
True, but how would you communicate? True, that's all true in your mind. How would you communicate that to me if we didn't speak the same language? And pointing and grunting and doesn't qualify.
Yeah, no. Well, if you take out some of my, I was going to say anyway, I wouldn't be able to communicate these thoughts if we didn't know the same language. That's the value.
Hence why it all comes down to, is the brain really just, okay, my end point was, okay, if all that is true, then consciousness is just maybe the brain trying to find an evolutionary response to do better by lying to itself, because it isn't good. Like, why are we thinking that if consciousness is an illusion, why did the brain even make it possible for us to think that if it evolved that way? Because that's showing us that.
Why did the brain begin to think that it was a thinking, experiencing self, is your question?
Yes, because you say it's a false equivalence, and that's not true, but then that would equate to
what?
We think we have. I think I have. I think I'm conscious of myself.
You are a brain who has created this illusion of consciousness.
Why?
This word conscious. Why? Because it's useful for a self. It's a more coherent, simpler story than I am a bunch of neurons. That's why.
But that is one factor that makes us lose equilibrium with being balanced on this earth that would keep us here longest, because it's all about us surviving as a species. The only reason we're here. We're not here.
Right, you see what we're doing to each other. We're not going to survive as a species. So this is how our extinction happened.
So that's my point. So what do we so the end game is, why is the brain even giving us this fake illusion or real illusion or anything of consciousness, when the ultimate goal, that consciousness or believing we
because
have
there's no
one,
intelligent design.
still ultimately believes to us destroying ourselves, because
there's no
really
intelligent design, because that's how it happens. That's how species go extinct, because their
that's,
evolution
so
was not adaptive.
that's my end game of shit. We just random species that are on the scale for nature to go through like the dodo bird, but we just stayed here to live it long. We didn't go out like a dodo bird and jump off mountains and kill ourselves. We killed each other.
We're gonna bomb each other and destroy our home.
So why did the brain do it to us? You're right.
Because
the brain did actually self-destruct itself by becoming more intelligent, to unalive itself.
Yeah, because never before has our destruction of ourselves been an evolutionary pressure. We've never been at risk of destroying ourselves before. Our consciousness, our sense of self, it was only advantageous for our socializing, and socializing was advantageous for our survival and reproduction. So this is a new evolutionary pressure.
Which is coming down to your kids. Am I right?
Maybe.
To define it. Well, I'm trying to get the overall. Okay, this ramble all goes into why you overall doing this research and try to explain of the consciousness itself. Because with the end game, it just says you're right, but what's your point of doing research when, just like I said, so it goes back to philosophical questions, or if God did exist, and what are you even trying for? Like, if we ultimately came down to,
if brains learn that they're brains, that's the single most important thing. That's the most important thing a brain can learn.
But okay, so how do you say we learn we're a brain when you're kind of saying that the brain makes it up? How can the brain recognize it as conscience through your test when your overall conclusion is it's all an illusion?
Do it one more time.
Your test is to make a person recognize that is
my information pamphlet. My test is to see whether they already do.
Whether they're critical thinking skills and have critical recognition skills.
Whether they have recognition, yeah.
Critical recognition. Well, what would be the point if the end game says the brain is just fooling you to think any of this, where you proving that it had critical recognition?
The brain has certain illusions. You're experiencing those because you are a brain. Those illusions were useful for most of our evolution. Now we have the information, like only the last 200 years have we gotten the information to dispel that illusion.
If you put it like that, I'm going to say that the evolutionary response has been doing its thing, but it was totally changed from technology, because technology helped us. Other than that, I really can't see how
also culture.
Any of that changed. Huh?
Culture.
What changes culture? Technology.
Sure.
You want to ride on the horse, or do you want to drive in the car? The technology changed you from going from...
Technology is also a part of culture, sure, and it affects the other aspects of culture.
I think it's more than what we think. I think that the technology part made us recognize more of the brain part, the separation between.
Absolutely. fMRI, heading to the past, fMRI most recently, agriculture and fire. All of those technologies are how a couple of us have learned that we're brains.
Exactly. And over the last 50 years, our technology has taken us to a point that we have evolved further in technology than our understanding of it or self and how to use it. That's
Yeah.
my issue.
Yeah. Also,
And right now,
we've created cells that understand themselves.
yeah. So that brings me back to my thing of like end game is how can you truly know if you're helping somebody realize critical recognition.
All right, hold on. Can you re-ask that in a different way? Because anytime I hear "how can you truly know," I can't truly know.
Then I guess that's my point. You can truly never know.
You can never truly know anything. But I'm still fucking stuck here. My mom doesn't want me to kill myself, so.
I'm with you. Huh? I'm with you. That was the most bait job. I got you. Job. That last part hit me hard. I got you.
Let me go pee real quick. So, do you see the? You look like you're thinking.
I was trying to associate what we were talking about and what you just said. Like, what motivates a person to get up every day and just live? And I say that because I've never been a person that dealt with depression until I got on some medication that fucked me up permanently for life. By the time I realized I was like crying, I'm happy, cheery, calm down, Chris. And I'm on this blood pressure medication with a couple other things, like literally on 4 or 5. And it took me about 6 months to realize I've been waking up with no motivation to move, crying for no reason. Like this is true depression on a messed up with my brain, the chemicals in my brain where I cannot fight it. Only, I shit you not, that lasted for a while until I told my doctor, because I could not believe a doctor could prescribe you something. I didn't have suicidal thoughts, but then I got why they would, you hear medication may cause suicidal thoughts. Like, it's bullshit. Why would they? That can't be true until I was actually on something for a good, and it's blood pressure medication. So, with that, at least 3 months before we want to hear from you how it's affecting you. Give it 6 months and we're talking about it. Well, within that 6 months, I think month 8, I came back and was like, I got some mental issues and I cannot describe them whatsoever. So I'm saying how, and it made me think about death. As a species, the depression was mostly brought on by the notion of death. Most other creatures don't have this notion to go into it. But we have the ability, but the brain kind of catches you if you're not really depressed. I thought about it. I never thought about death. I always woke up and said, let me find something to do with my life. Right? Let me go outside and hug a tree, run through the fucking grass. Only when I got depressed and my chemical reactions and I truly understood depression that you can't physically fight it. I get it why you're depressed. You can smile in people's face, but that shit is something a blanket you cannot take off you. And slowly the blanket has been coming off from me, which is why I'm getting my business straight. And I made myself a promise, but I got to say I'm fucked up from that medication. And it made a happy-go-lucky boy who was Chris, calm your happy ass down to I'm afraid to die. I don't want to get out of my bed. What the fuck is wrong with me? I have to go back to my doctor. This is nothing I've ever experienced. How does the brain, in your opinion, it deals with death? Only unless you're sitting there dealing with it. But if you're not depressed, you wake up and the brain convinces you, get out of bed. Go do it. You told me.
Convince you of anything. The brain just starts doing. And then when you're so I don't really know. And it's something that would,
because I was saying, like, part of that is becoming, or delusion, like you said, coming more critical recognition. But I feel that is not helping, because most creatures that don't have that critical recognition, if you sat there and thought about death all day, you wouldn't do anything. You would just be crippled. But then the brain doesn't naturally make us think about that. What we consider normal, doesn't sit dwelling on death. But I noticed with the medication, if I was depressed, the medication, I think, screwed up some chemicals. So naturally, the brain is fighting to make you not think about death, even though we can.
Chris,
but then
try to speak without pretending that you are separate from your brain. Or if you don't want to, that's okay to get this thought out.
Well,
I don't know
if I can do that. I don't know if I'm trained.
You're not trained.
Like, give me
we're training you now.
give me an example, because I really don't know.
What did you just say? Your brain, what'd you just say?
Yeah, like your brain tries to convince you to get up every day to do. That's how it naturally goes. But maybe depression.
All right, let's try to say that sentence without presuming that the self and brain or that you and your brain are different.
Then I will have to speak not in the third person. How would I present that question? I dwell on death when I'm depressed. Why?
Well, one way
If I have the ability to have critical recognition, I have the ability for critical recognition. I'm a brain. Why am I bombarding myself with the notion of death when it serves no logical no.
Hold on. Now, this is the value of it theory, because it can be very difficult to talk about the brain when you talk about it as one thing, fooling myself, for instance, because that's not entirely accurate. It's more of there's one it fooling, if you will, another it, or feeding thoughts about death. For some reason, there's an it that normally isn't active, that's feeding thoughts about, that's giving thoughts about death. I don't know why. I have no idea. I have never heard of that, and I totally believe that. But I'm scrambling trying to figure out how. But I don't really know anything about blood pressure medication. So, but if anything that can change brain activity is going to change mental activity. So yeah. So there are probably a bunch of different ways that you can end up at death. Death has become a preoccupation of our species. It helped with our survival, that preoccupation. It's also, we had that preoccupation because we're able to think about other times besides now. We're able to really almost exist in the future. And that's another big difference between us and other species, which is why they're not as preoccupied with death, because no death. So, but us, we can think about the future and stuff. And so we had this thing about death. So I'm sure there are lots of little things that you could change in the brain. You change this, and that brain's going to be thinking about death. Change this, and that brain's going to be thinking about death. It's probably quite a delicate system keeping us from thinking about death.
Exactly. That's my point. What is that delicacy? And death is only one example. I'm only using death as one example. Don't get me wrong. It could be anything, but me specifically, I'm talking about myself and my example.
And me, I was suicidal from 2009 until I'd like to think this past May, but we'll see whether this was just a blip or not. So I really should have more answers about that, but I don't.
And this was more of a brainstorming to get your ideal of it, because I experienced that, and I thought it was the weirdest thing, because at one point, and this is a regular conversation, at one point I really thought depression. I kind of looked at it like, why don't you just get over it? I was one of those dicks, but I didn't know any better until I experienced, and I was like, wow, it is like a blanket.
Yeah.
I just want to get out of this coat and go back to normal, but it's so heavy. Some days it's a jacket. Some days
it just feels like the lights are out.
And you cannot turn, and you know what a switch is, but you don't even want to turn the switch on.
Yeah.
Why am I thinking about this? Why is it something
and
that
also,
comes
no,
up?
you don't know where the switch is, and it's not a question of want. Since there's no consciousness to go in and turn the lights on.
Oh yeah, that was just a stupid analogy, how we put constraint, how we are.
Yeah, no, but the only way to, and that's what's important about understanding that there's no consciousness. The only way to change brain activity is to change what's fed into it. So the whole sit stem, all of the brain, it's. That means that every mechanism in the brain is has conditions that it needs to be activated. Now, that's not entirely true. There's some that run on loop, regulating your heartbeat, certain memory, blah, 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 blah. But all of them can be affected by new inputs, because they're still that have conditions. But even if maybe those conditions are easily met or always met or something, I don't know. But So anybody people who think, you were a former member of this community who think, oh, if you have ADHD, pull it together. If you have depression, get out of bed, blah, blah, blah. It must be that you don't know that you should get out of bed. It must be that you don't think that it's important what you're supposed to do out of bed. That's what we think. But no, of course not. It's just that we are brains. And so we need certain inputs to get the right outputs. Now, typically, the input-output processor is such that if you get the normal inputs, you get the normal outputs. But sometimes, if there's a change to those processors, you can get the normal inputs and not have the normal outputs.
I agree. I'd like to know the why, more of the why. I don't know when we'll, man, I don't know when we'll
But we
get
can
there.
brainstorm about that through a map-it. We can look at research about the will to live. We can look at the biology of the will to live. Maybe there's research on people who, were suicidal or had suicidal ideation versus, normal people. And maybe we'll see there was underactivity in a certain thing, or, their reward system was less responsive or something. And so then, we could put words to that. We can say, for instance, if I have something to do, then I must do it, is for some reason not as operational in people with depression or ADHD or something like that. And we can try to define it that way, come up with different possible narratives of how the its are interacting to go from normal inputs to depressed outputs.
Oh my goodness, Neo.
It'd be mostly
Neo, no eres un gato, un pequeño gato.
No, he's not.
No, he's not.
You're a little dog. Oh. Pero Neo, calm down, calm down. Espera.
Wait,
He's
I gotta
a
get a
little-
photo.
Are you okay? Okay. Oh, he's really excited.
Yeah.
You think he remembers the path
Yeah.
and he likes Cádiz?
Hey, Neo. Boy, we'll go in a second, okay, buddy?
Ah.
It'd be mostly brainstorming. We wouldn't really figure it out, but it would be really useful brainstorming because we'd be developing a technique for other people to be able to brainstorm about their psychological events and how their mechanisms are interacting to produce their experience and decisions and behavior. And so then, like, one thing that you would do, like, for instance, if we were to do that, for instance, that project of trying to do a map-it of depression in the morning. Chris's depression map-it. You're coming out of it. You probably didn't keep a journal.
No.
But you still have some memories of it. Some memories that will be reconstruction, will be slightly different from the original, but whatever. And even though you're coming out of it, you're not totally out of it, right?
True.
So, you could look at specifically what are the conditions. You look at, okay, on this day I stayed in bed. And then you just try to write down all the things that were true about that day. On this day, hey, feels like sort of the blanket's off. I don't have to force a smile or anything. What are the conditions of that day? And then we brainstorm about how it went from those conditions to those consequences. And then you look at the biology and compare that to try to be as empirical as possible. For instance, yeah, one day I did not want to get out of bed. Then someone responded to my comment on Instagram, and I don't know. And then 30 minutes later, I was out of bed. Okay, we're gonna note that. So maybe what that means is that although if I need to do something, then I should do it, it isn't working as well. Or maybe that it is able to work better when if other people if other people talk to me, then I'm accountable to other people. I exist in a group or something. I have responsibility to that group, and then somehow that responsibility is what's giving the final push to the motivation, you know?
Damn, man, you might have came up with a concept for a new app. Give me some information over a 30-day period. We noticed you went out walking after your sister and brother, after conversation with your sister and brother.
Yeah.
Randomly. And you never noticed it.
And you know what'd be great?
Damn.
Is they would have to give us permission to all their data. In fact, even running their
that's what I was actually being funny, but for the app. But no, you actually came up with a good method of coming down for your hits. And yeah, I was being funny. That make a cool ass. Of course, that getting the permission with us knowing your actual life. How would that be?
But actually, Chris, that's a wonderful idea. And the company I want to start, when I stopped having this dream 10 years ago or before that, was exactly projects like that, using psychological information to produce products. And honestly, it'd be terribly dangerous, but yes, absolutely. And you could have an AI, and you could also have an AI doing the processing, right? Like, hey, not an AI that just tells you, hey, get out of bed, but an AI that, says, when you are contacted by this person, you are motivated for 2 days or something. I recommend that you reach out to that person, blah, blah, because it's not easy for us to associate.
I'm a programmer, so every time you're saying it, I'm already just like, so the AI you would configure your AI to notice patterns of good stuff. Hey, the phone has a tracking. We noticed you went out to the park today. And the AI will associate that. We'll look at all your tasks you did within the last 24 hours prior and after, and make that comparison, and just make the little loop of, he went to the grocery store and brought apples right before. Let me put a pin in it. Oh, the day he did go outside, he brought grapes. What's up with this fresh fruit thing? Let me branch off to that. Oh, the chemical it might be a chemical balance in the food you're eating that causes this. Holy shit, you just saved the world, bro. I'm proud of you. I want to be involved in that.
I want you to do it. I'll consult. Absolutely.
Oh, that is so awesome. We're gonna end on that good note, because I've been talking to you and my mouth is dry.
All right. Can I call you tomorrow?
Oh, definitely, man. I hate talking to you only because we talk too long.
Yeah.
Not as a bad thing at all, but you get what I'm saying. Like,
yeah,
I gotta have.
All right, I'm gonna shoot you a text tomorrow.
For sure.
All
Good
right,
talking to you,
buddy.
Later.